action. We are discussing biotech with the one and only world famous Shelley Miller. How's it going?
Hey Dan. Hey
How
Chris.
how long have we known each other? It's like one of my longest, like in the industry, people I've known for the longest, yet we don't talk that often. But I feel like we have important talks when we do.
But when we talk, it's like we just pick up right where we left off.
Um, Biotechs are getting crushed, right? Crushed.
Big time.
And that is your world. You are completely living in, if I'm understand correctly, only what, mid cap, small cap, micro cap? What kind of
Sure, we
clients do you have?
yeah, we work with private companies as well. So we're a true boutique agency in the sense that, we actually get our hands dirty. We do things that other agencies don't do.
Hmm.
My partner comes from big agency, global agency, Leo Burnett's, and it's funny, people don't know who Leo Burnett is because we're getting so old.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh,
But that's
the show
PR, right?
Mad Men.
PR.
Pardon me?
That's PR.
Yeah, and I kind of come from the trenches. So, I mean, I studied classical piano and worked in the rock and roll industry and ended up in healthcare and marketing and comms and really, what it comes down to is, people just want to be spoken to like a human being. To the best of your ability, just speak clearly. And then it comes into the packaging and all the other stuff. So we're a little bit different in the
But when
sense
in
that
your case, do you mean retail investors, patient advocacy groups? Who is
all of the
people?
above.
All
All
of
of the
them.
above. I mean, there's no company, every company has multiple targeted audiences. You're going to want to talk to your stakeholders, people who are already invested. You want to develop those relationships through conversation, through transparency, through relationship building, so they become loyalists. So they'll stick with you when times are good and they're happy, and they stick with you when times are bad. But then you've got the strategics. A lot of small companies are looking to partner, whether it's going to be a European partnership or a US partnership. They're going to be looking to collaborate with other people for various reasons. Then you have the patient advocacy groups. Patient advocacy
Huge, huge.
groups,
Let's talk a little
huge.
bit
And
about
and
that. This one's for Guru Nation.
I mean, I think patient advocacy audiences are way underutilized. I was working with a client that was recruiting, and they weren't having a lot of success getting their last patient, and we hooked them up with the cancer related patient advocacy group, and they said, "Oh, we have that patient," you
Hmm.
know, and then and
So the marketing
speaking.
sometimes is focused like it's not just retail investors and then that's it. It's like more strategic partners. It's let's do some marketing to get the patient advocacy groups because they're going to do the grassroots marketing for you. This is something that one of my holdings does fairly well, AQST. They may not address the retail crowd. They actually don't do a very good job, in my opinion. I want to introduce you to them, but they don't do a good job introducing retail to the stock. They have enough people, I guess, on Twitter and X that do it. I'm one of them. My boy, we have a guy named the Biotech Scanner who's the other guy that does it. But they do a good job of getting out there with patient advocacy groups. So because it's an anaphylaxis shock, they go after the allergy communities, pediatric allergy, and they actually do a fairly good job of that. So maybe I'm
That's
just too
huge.
naive to think it's just retail investors. It's much
No,
more
you
than
know
that.
what? I mean, I think first of all, I think companies and sorry, but investor relations firms and so on, I think they really underestimate our retail investors. Sure, you have the players. You have the people that just want to play, and if you could just say we have low float, our stock moves, they'll be happy. But then you have the more sophisticated retail investors, and I think COVID really changed a lot of that, where more people joined the market than ever before. We were home, we were bored, we were scared, we were uncertain. And so people had a lot of time on their hands. And I think we have a more savvy retail investor audience now than we've ever had before. And it's a really big mistake to underestimate those. In fact, I don't even call them retail investors anymore. I call them social investors
So
because you
you
don't know.
coined that.
I did.
Yes,
Uh,
you coined this shout out to Ashley Margot, who's still our one of our, I mean, she's a pivotal piece of our empire here. Trajectory, you've seen the bubbles pop, you've seen the companies do well, you've seen them completely fall out. I'm sure you've seen some scams. What are some red flags that investors should look out for?
There's some traditional behavior that they do. Like, if I see I want to see comms coming. I want to hear the message directly from the company. I think the company should control the narrative always. And if the company, you and I actually worked on a company one time where they had heavy retail social investors in their investor base, and they brought in a traditional investor relations person from the inside, and they had a traditional investor relations firm on the outside, and they didn't like the retail investors, but the majority of the shareholders were retail social investors. If a company doesn't control the narrative, they will. And so I think the biggest red flag is I mean, when I look at a company, I look at what are the social investors saying? What are their pain points? What are they talking about
Or
with the
are
company?
there
What kind of
any? Are there
right?
any to begin with?
And are there
Yeah.
what is the breakdown? What is the how many institutional, how many insiders, how many retail? Is it blended? If you have a heavy weight on any of these things, it's okay. Heavy retail is retail tactics and social tactics. That's fine, but you got to manage it differently than you do an institutional block of investors and shareholders, you know, like banks and so on. Social investors, and we saw with this one company, they didn't control the narrative, so the social did. And when they removed the CEO, they didn't like it, and they did a counter proxy and they won. They haven't done anything with it since then,
Was that
but
the
it was
one that's changed their name
yeah.
and the symbol?
I don't want to say. I don't want to make anybody mad. I want to be nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm just
But
trying
but
to
but
figure it out.
um but you know it was an example of the fact, and you kind of learn this with the meme stocks. If you don't control the narrative, they will.
Yeah.
So Dan and I have a consulting service. I literally did a call this morning with a potential client at 9 a.m. my time, on the Pacific time. Um, and she asked, is right now the right time to start a site? And I said, well, it depends on your structure. And she said, well, no, I mean, is it the right time economically? Are we heading for a disaster? Right. So everybody's fearful
Oh
of
no,
what's to
that's
come.
an easy one.
So
Do it.
wait. My answer to her was there is no crystal ball anyone has in terms of what
Yes.
the economic future looks like. You do have maybe things to consider, things that you're seeing, but you cannot live your life as though tomorrow there will be a disaster, right?
Right. I know people have been asking that question for 20 years and never started a site.
I told her in terms of, I said, so I don't know
Yeah.
if you're asking me general economics or you're asking me specific to RFK, which is what everyone's concern is in this industry.
Oh, Shelly, let's. Ooh.
So I said, in terms of
They're a
RFK,
hornet's nest.
so I said, in terms of RFK, I don't think that's problematic for the sites, which I honestly believe. I think it actually could be good for sites because he wants more safety, wants more safety testing, which is bad for sponsors. They're going to
Right.
invest more money. Great for sites, right? There's more studies. So um, I said, from a site level, which is what you're looking to do, RFK is all good, right? Now, from your perspective, Shelley, RFK may be a bad thing. I don't know.
Well, you know, from a comms perspective, um, a company, especially a clinical stage company where, you know, they have extreme, unbelievable burn rates and you know, they're losing money all the time. If you have to make a choice between in a period of uncertainty between keeping your trials running or communicating with your stakeholders and building your brand and looking for that strategic whatever your comms objectives are, you're gonna stay alive and stay in the in the clinic because
Mm-hmm.
without that asset, without that data, you're dead anyway. So you know, I mean, actually think times like this, and I appreciate the questions and the conversation. I love disruption. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to kind of pull back a little bit and get ready. I'm always like, this is the opportunity for you to be first in line when it comes back online. So that means instead of pull back, you may go forward in a different way. You may not go as big and loud, but what is your strategy? What is your objective? What is the foundation that you're going to launch from when it's time to launch?
Mm,
Um, so I think periods of fear are a really, really good time to regroup and get ahead of the group. And what I see, unfortunately, a lot of clinical stage companies do is they do the opposite. Is they're just they kind of go like, my gosh. It's like you
sure.
go big, you go.
And
I
and
mean,
what
now with digital marketing and digital comms, educate. I mean, going back again to our social investors, don't underestimate their intelligence. And so educate them on the things that you want them to understand. I mean, things like, now, how does a clinical trial work? And how does a clinical trial work? And what are you going to do if your government funding for your clinical trial is paused? What do you do? How do you
Yeah.
operate?
People are
What's going to
ignorant.
happen?
so
Even investors
so
are ignorant to that stuff. Like,
Right.
yeah, we
well,
can go on forever about that.
well, to summarize, and I think again, Warren Buffett offers the best summary. Your approach should be when there's blood in the streets, you should be buying. When
Mhm.
everybody's greedy, you should be selling.
Is there
Right.
blood in the streets now in biotech?
That's where I was going.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think so. I mean, I see companies with 50% valuations and there's no bad news.
Oof.
I
Chris,
mean,
send that money fast, man. We got to make some investments.
and
So
everybody's just kind of on pause. And it's like, okay, so while you're on pause, I understand that there's a lot of things behind the scenes that, contractors and marketing and people from my perspective aren't going to see. And I understand that and respect that. But anymore, I think we make comms just so much harder than it needs to be. And again, going back to that really narrow tunnel of what you can and cannot do, what you can and cannot say, that's an advantage
Hmm.
because you know your parameters, and we've been doing regulated industries for almost 20 years. You know your parameters of what you can and cannot say it. I mean, we're finding silly things like social media posts. They do better with social investors with no elaborate designed image,
Right.
just a simple URL and a headline and a ticker. And it gets more clicks and more read throughs than a nice looking social media post. So
Because they
the,
know
the,
it's
the
coming from a peer as opposed to somebody who's perceived to be
who's
have
spinning?
something to get
They're
from the
right.
spinning.
message. Yeah.
So
Which is brings it to the other thing I've watched over the years and at times have participated in is the paid and sponsored content.
Yeah.
Right now, after so much stuff that we have online and just being hammered with things, just people want to hear directly from the horse's mouth. And it's not just the
Mhm.
CEO. They want to hear from the CFO. They want to hear from the CSO. They want to hear from people, who are who are on the ground that are, human beings. They don't want to hear it from paid messaging.
so I think my final question in terms of fear porn, Shelley.
I know you haven't asked any in terms of fear
I
porn.
did
It has
RFK.
been very
That's
scary. You're
not
not
fear
very
porn.
scary.
So comparing 2008, which at least in my experience was the worst for the pharmaceutical industry in terms of the research side of it. And I think Dan would agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm sure he would agree with
That
it.
was worse than today.
Well, that was my question. Is it worse? So what this all started probably in late 2007 for the research industry. There were signs in late 2007, definite signs in late 2008, and then the collapse began in 2009, right? So are there any signs similar today or worse than the initial onset for the research industry back then? Is it worse? Is it better now? What are you perceiving?
So My perception on the markets and companies and everything back then is different than what it is today for me. But what I've found over the years is that when one area of the industry is being hammered, there may be another that's doing well. Like the last time biotech microcaps were doing badly, digital health was doing great. People were
Mm.
funding apps with no business model.
Was this COVID?
I think it was a little bit before COVID.
Okay.
So it was, and then COVID was just insane where they were just throwing money around and
Oh yeah.
companies were IPOing left and right.
Yeah.
And so there's been a lot of different trends. I would say the broader trend from my perspective, and again, this is just going to be from my own perspective, has been, when the industry is hit in certain areas, what do you do to regroup to get ready for it to come back online? Um, Research and clinical trials, in my opinion, it's always going to be necessary, and it's something that it's what we do. We have a regulatory process that we go through, and I think these things are important. But what COVID showed us was that we can expedite some of those regulatory processes, and now we're coming back to, okay, we expedited them, but did we miss safety, important safety elements and so on?
Mhm.
I would love to see a combination of all of that learning of, do we really have to take so long? Does it really have to cost an average of $5 billion to get a drug through market? And then you only have and this is an old stat, but it was something like 5,000 compounds ever make it to market.
Ah,
So, I mean,
I got
I mean,
something on that.
okay, what?
Well, wait, I want to finish.
Okay,
So
finish.
worse today than 2008-ish or not? The signs.
Not maybe necessarily. Well, right now, I think research is getting hammered because everything's there's a lot of pauses and there's a lot of uncertainty. So right now, I think clinical research is like, okay, what's going to happen now?
Mhm.
But for the microcap biotech, they've been hit really hard in the last few years, and
Yeah.
and you can have a company with nothing but great news. Good news, good news,
That's
good news, good news,
AQST.
and their valuation is 50% of what it was 5 years ago
But you
Okay.
for
just
no
keep
reason.
buying and buying and buying and buying. And one day, that's the alpha you gotta pay, but you need conviction. So I guess what Shelley's saying is it's been the Great Depression for small cap biotechs for years. Never been
Yeah.
worse. Never been more blood in the streets biotech. Now the
What
entire economy wise, it's not like '08, is I think what she's saying.
I
Yeah.
think so too. I think that's a fair interpretation. So what happens if we go into a recession? What would
You
be
know,
your
they
guess?
they they,
A
they keep
biotech ain't
changing the
getting
definition of a
killed.
recession.
No, this is
So
true, but a true recession. Not maybe as bad as the GFC, maybe not quite as bad as 2008, but where the unemployment rate is 6%, 7%, something like that. Unemployment rate in the GFC was over 10.
I'll run out of dry powder. No, I don't think I'll run out of dry powder to buy this AQST. I have that much conviction in it. I think clinical research holds up at the site,
mhm,
having a site. This is funny because
that's
this
true.
interview is going to be like half Guru Nation. I'll just put the whole thing on Chris and Dan show, and I'll put parts of it for Guru Nation. But I think sites are going to be okay because, like you just said, Shelly, you need the studies. The one that you're going to bring on for us to interview probably needs sites. Like they all need sites to
Everybody does.
execute their trials. What I'm worried about 5 years from now, and this kind of more fear porn. So wait, there's more. The NIH cuts. People are screaming, well, there's no more basic research. Biotechs are gonna dry up. There's no more innovation because the NIH is the necessary spending to get the core science, the building blocks that then the biotech start looking at and acquiring through tech transfer offices. What is your take? What are you hearing from the biotech executives in regards to innovation and where the next molecules, compounds, IP is going to come from? Are they concerned about the NIH cuts?
But I don't think that's true, is it? I'm just adding my 2 cents. I don't think that's entirely true about the NIH. I would guess less than half of the initiatives for new research come through the NIH, and much less than half.
No, but basic research to you don't know yet if it's
No, I
worthwhile
understand the petri
commercial.
dish. I understand the petri dish part of it. I believe most of that still comes from private industry. That's my opinion. I don't think most of it comes from the NIH.
And,
What
I'm kind of I'm kind of an optimist, eternal optimist, and I have a lot of belief in ego and people's desire for power. They can't screw this up forever, right? If if you want to be reelected, you're going to have to figure this out, and you're going to have to figure this out in a way that benefits people who vote for you. And I put a lot of stock in that because I think we're not going to lose the NIH. It's gonna come back better than ever, is my opinion. And as far as what's going on is with innovation right now, like I was saying before we started recording, I'm in Utah, and Utah was a big surprise for me. It's a state with some really smart people, really, really good schools and universities, and they come here for school and they don't leave because the quality of life is so good here. And it's a sensible state, and there's a lot of innovation here. And I think we have pockets of that throughout this wonderful country where we have these pockets of really great, wonderful innovation. And there's support, especially at the bench level, for that innovation to continue. And like in Utah, there's a lot of programs that do help support the ongoing growth and development, and I like that. I think that's really great. It's more on the state level, and the feds will figure it out. And if they don't, well, then you know what, they're going to go away and be replaced.
Yeah,
And
or
and
the concern
and I
is
like that.
like they go to other countries, like there are Stripe has an initiative called the ARC Institute, where it's private funding. Howard Hughes Medical Institute's privately funded, but it's nowhere near 48 billion a year. That was what the NIH was doing. And by the way, the NIH is not going away, but I asked Grok to do a deep search on this question, and it suggests about 13% of total U.S. research funding comes from the NIH. So
Wow,
it
exactly?
seems
a lot.
it seems likely that
Exactly.
That's
investigational
a lot.
products
Oh, that's
primarily
very
come from
little.
pharmaceutical and biotech companies, with contributions from academia and government agencies like the NIH. Um, so they contribute to
Hmm.
it. So it's hard to put a number on it because what do they actually contribute? They contribute maybe the stuff that private industry doesn't want to contribute because it costs more.
Well, but R&D, you have to think about it from, take a large pharma company, right? Pfizer. How do they expand? They have to come up with new compounds, right? So they're constantly looking at how do we tweak a compound, how do we create a new compound in order to expand. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a have to. So it comes from privately owned,
So 13% basically,
comes
which is
from
still significant.
NIH.
It's
Oh
still
no,
significant.
without a
Like,
doubt. But it's
yeah.
not to the point I think that you were kind of conveying initially, and that's why I jumped in
That's
there.
what critics of the
Yeah.
cuts are saying. Like, oh, well, where are we
Yeah,
gonna
and they're
get
wrong.
the
And they're wrong.
well,
Well, it's gonna be interesting to see how it all plays out. I think there's room, there's the state, there's the universities, there's private money, and there's other groups and organizations. We need the research funding, in my opinion. We need these organizations, but we also need them to be more sustainable. And I would like to see. Well, I'm just, again, dating me here. I'm a Pollyanna. I just believe that, people, it can work out in a really great way. The
yeah,
silver lining from COVID was, we were caught not prepared for a pandemic. Shame on us.
yeah.
But what we also then proved and showed was that we can run expedited clinical trials, and we can respond quickly to things. So I would hope that, and as we work through this new era of uncertainty, I would hope that we take some of the learning from that and we come up with a better, more accountable, a better funded, a better supported system of regulatory where we can get things out faster
Well,
and
private
better.
industry always to the rescue. And I'm with you and Chris in this. I also suspect that NH was not responsible for that much. I'm just being an echo chamber for the voices out there watching because the majority of my channel believes this is bad for the industry. and it's certainly
Yeah.
not good, but it's good for the country. It's bad for the industry because we're not in a
But it,
vacuum.
but you
But
know what?
constraints breed innovation, so maybe it's ultimately good.
I mean, we're a magnificent country with magnificent innovation and brilliant minds. I just don't think that goes away just because there's uncertainty going on. I
Yeah.
think we figure it out.
But
And
the
we always
alarmists are saying it's a brain drain. Other countries are going to catch up as far as R&D. China's already stealing.
Yeah, but that's not true either because, for example, France, they have no R&D really to speak of because it's all controlled by government, right? And then they don't reward the pharmaceutical companies that do find or have a development or an advancement in pharma because they negotiate their prices to such minimal costs because again, it's controlled by the government that they can't recoup their R&D costs. All R&D comes from, for the most part, from this country.
And
That
funneled through the NIH in many ways.
so you know that the kind of I mean the Pollyanna in me, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and creative opportunity, and not just from the companies but from states and so on. I mean, you know, I go back to my beloved new home state here. It's great. I mean, but so a couple years ago, and I do a lot of work with Bio Utah, the trade association here in Utah, and I kind of I was excited because what they're doing is what I've always thought could be done on a national level, and they're doing it on a state level. Where you know, our production company just did a video on why Utah, and it's because they collaborate. But anyway, I digress. I could go on, but there was this press release a couple years ago where the state of Utah went into an MOU agreement with the UK. When the UK went in and did Brexit, and they left the EU, they haven't had a trade agreement with the United States since Brexit, and they're losing billions and billions in trade dollars. So the UK went to certain state hubs and said, let's do an MOU. And typically these MOUs are, you know, photo ops, you know, oh, we're friends. We're going to do an MOU. We're going to send a delegation to Utah. We're going to send a delegation to the UK, and oh, we're friends. But from my workforce development background in another life I've had, I saw it as an opportunity because Utah is so unique in the sense that they actually do things. They don't just talk about it, they actually do stuff. Um, I thought there was an opportunity to do something more with that MOU. I'm going to brush it off again, but so we went into and I basically designed a clinical trials concept. Right now, U.S. companies will go to Australia and they do clinical trials in Australia.
For
And the
cheaper,
question
right?
came, pardon me?
For cheaper on the phase 1 stuff.
The phase one is cheaper, it's faster, they can get data in just a couple of months and so on. And there's a lot of advantages to doing that. And so the question came up, well, why not the UK? And so I designed an entire clinical trials concept, which would basically create a bridge for Utah companies to do clinical trials in the UK. There's multiple reasons why that would be desirable versus Australia, but there was a lot of red tape and a lot of things to figure out. And then, you know, the uncertainty with what's going to go on with tariffs and trade agreements and so on. And then just yesterday, you know, we had Starmer in the White House. And so I think there's an opportunity, but I think there's an opportunity for a lot more of that. Not just Utah, not just the UK, but it's like, okay, we have these people that are doing what they're doing. We have business to run, we have innovations to develop, we have clinical trials to do, we have lives to save. I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, it comes
So
down to
more public-private partnerships, you think?
right. And I think there's an opportunity to say, okay, the UK, for example, has a really diverse patient population. Australia does not. Okay,
Hmm.
so you have a smaller patient population in Australia, but you have a larger patient population and diverse population.
Yeah.
Both have the support of public health that's attractive. Um, there's two tracks in the UK where you can get additional funding. So my point is, without getting into any more weeds, is there's an opportunity when when the status quo is disrupted, there's an opportunity to look for creative ways to be more sustainable and to keep going better. And then again, the competitiveness in me is to get to that front of the line. So when things do come back online, you're there.